Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Navigating Amateur Motocross, part of the Coach Robb podcast network. That's a tongue twister, Derek. This episode is brought to you by Energy Fuel, so we appreciate their support of the show. Derek, it's been a few sunsets since we last saw each other.
Yeah, I don't even know how long it's been, but it's been over a month, which is not our typical schedule. And both of us been a little bit busy, so just weren't able to firm down a solid day. Glad you could make it with me today.
No, absolutely. And just so you guys know how dedicated Derek is, Derek's in a different time zone than I am, and we're recording this quite early in the morning. So I'm not even sure the sun is up where Derek's at right now. So we
Gotta watch reach them up. Yeah.
we definitely appreciate it. We did receive quite a few DMs from you guys, so thank you for asking where we were at. I'll take full responsibility. We were in Italy for a couple weeks, and as well as in France, working on some projects that we'll announce here with Derek here probably in January, but it'll be something that will benefit everybody who's a listener of this show. Hence the word Navigating Amateur Motocross. We've got some really cool projects that we're working on. And Derek, you and I were talking about this before we turned on the recording. You know, this is a very interesting time of the year. If we look at the national championships, I always say it's the first week in August. I know the calendar's moving it up every month or every year there. But for the most part, people got done with the national championships. They've taken a month, maybe 6 weeks off. In our world, in the human performance world, we refer to that as an off season. A lot of people are familiar with that.
Because our show schedule's delayed, back up here. You said people have taken a month off, but that's only if they really paid attention to Coach Robb, amateur navigating, because a lot of these guys haven't taken a month off or 6 weeks off.
That's true.
So we need to get into that in a little bit today's podcast too.
Well, and it brings up a good point because by the time this airs, right, it will be closer to 7 weeks since a national championship. And when we're talking about the subject of periodization, for those of you that take notes during the show, which we highly encourage you to do so, I mean, Derek and I came up with this name, and it's legitimately, our vision is exactly what the name of the show is, Navigating Amateur Motocross. So the sooner you start taking notes, Derek and I, we've joked about this before, where we'll have some people that will approach us and they'll tell us about, hey, I'm going to read 52 books this year. And my joke pushing back is, how about you just read one book and do what the book says? And I really don't want that to come across as snide, and I hope you'll take that to heart. We're sitting here, this is our 19th show. We've done 18 previous shows where we've had guests on here that have been there and done that at the highest level. We want to make sure that we give you guys the straightest shot from where you're at to where you want to go. Today's subject is trying to leverage the early season and have fun doing it. We're going to talk about what that really means, but if you're taking notes, I want you to write down 4 seasons. We'll start with the national championship. That would be the last phase of your competitive season. Ideally, that would be your last AAA priority race of the year. We try to have our athletes peak 3 times a year. Not very popular in amateur motocross, but we try to peak at 3 specific times during the year. Then you move into the off season that we were just speaking about. Then you move into preseason, and then you move into pre-competitive. In today's show, we're just going to stay focused on preseason. And Derek, I don't know about you, but preseason is, in our world, the most important time of the year. This is the one, ironically, that I would say not taking an off season, to your point earlier. That's probably the biggest mistake. The second biggest mistake is not taking a preseason and leveraging it. If you have followed us for any period of time, we've used the magic number of 6 months when it comes to human performance. So the body that you're sitting with today is a byproduct of what you've eaten specifically and the workouts that you've done over the last 6 months. This is another part, Derek, that's really hard for our young amateurs because they think if they lift weights on Monday, they should be strong on Friday. Doesn't work that way. It's a 6-month lag. So when we're looking at the value of preseason, we're going to get into some things that you guys can do. And I hate to use the word fun because nowadays everybody's a little bit butthurt if they're not having fun doing everything. I do want to have some fun factor in it, but I want there to be purpose with it. So Derek, before we jump into the physiology side, from your standpoint, how would you leverage preseason, right? We don't have no AAA races on the calendar. Doesn't mean that we don't go do pickup races, but we're not worried about if we get a 5th place or whatever. When it comes to setting up a bike or getting comfortable with the bike or understanding your bike, what would you recommend during this 12 to 16 week preseason stage?
Imagine if you were a supercross professional. Right now, they have about a 1 month dead time, like a Jet Lawrence, a Hunter Lawrence, Eli Tomac, where after designations, and let's say maybe it's 2 months, but realistically, they have about a 1 month dead time where they're trying to take a break, and then they have a 1 month boot camp, and then they're right back into it. So with the current SMX scheduling, that's all they get. If you told those guys, hey, I'm going to give you 16 weeks of you're capable of ride time, but there's no racing, and you don't really have to be on the razor's edge of fitness. We're not doing boot camp. We're not doing anything too functional. What do you think those guys would be doing with this time? And in my opinion, we already kind of know, but they would be developing the motorcycle with no pressure, with enough time to really go through settings and enough time to really understand those settings, because they could ride it on a diversity of conditions over the course of not just a day or 1 lap or 2 laps or 5 laps. And it would be good for the team. Unfortunately, they don't have that. But if you told them, hey, you could have that, they'd be like, oh man, I wish I had that. This is awesome. So as a moto family, you have to understand that this is a great opportunity and time to get your bike right. In addition to the things we're going to talk about for you, and getting your bike right might mean confirming that it's already good. Or, we kind of off air, we're getting an idea of, I hadn't talked to you in a while, so just BS a little bit. And you said, we said, if your kid has not grown or gotten faster since 1 year ago, something is probably wrong. The growing, okay, some kids don't grow, but the faster part, we would sure hope that in 1 year's time, we're a lot faster. So you need to reevaluate everything that you've done and say, okay, and then also, what areas are you strong or are you weak? And if you don't have notes on this throughout the year, like, man, we struggled all year long with this one idea. Well, now's your time to go work on that one idea. And if you don't do that, I mean, what are you doing? And number two is, for the amount of money that these families spend, I get this question all the time. And some of these people have different budgets than other ones, but what pipe should I run? If you're on a 2-stroke, go buy them all. They're, for $1,000 you can go, or let's say $1,500, you could buy every single pipe that's on the market. And I'm pretty sure after a couple rides, you could sell one to your buddy or put it on eBay and get a big percentage of your money back. Instead of asking me, because I don't know your kid, I don't know how he rides, I don't know exactly how he's going to respond to all of the inputs that a pipe can do, just go buy them all, go through them all, and then write notes. And what happens if you're like, man, we like 3 of those pipes, just stick them up, 2 of them, put them in the trailer. We know that on this track and on that track, and now you're more prepared than your competition. The same with suspension settings and all the things we've talked about previously on the show. So I think it's a great opportunity to, if you hopefully took notes all year, find your weak areas, go make calls, go pick my brain, go pick somebody else's brain on how to make your bike better in those weak areas. Suspension, chassis, if you haven't played around with fork settings and heights and sags and clickers and done all that, you probably should spend this next long block of time to go through all those settings, just to, like we've said on the show, it doesn't mean it's better and it doesn't mean it's worse. It just means you've tested it. And I think that the time that you can do it, because there's no pressure if you got no big events and whatever. And then also, it's a great opportunity for your kid. What I call it, like when they're really young, is developing your kid into becoming a test rider. If you guys are on like 65s, he's not going to be that good at this. And I don't expect him to be. That's an area where you, the parent, need to take charge. But you can start developing a rider at 65s to learn how to test. Tell him how to use his words and give me feedback. And can you tell? Can you not tell? And kind of go through these settings. And sometimes you'll be like, wow, he knew right away I changed something. And sometimes you're like, like if you had Jet Lawrence as a 65 rider, you'd go completely make the bike go backwards down the track and he would still be fast. And he'd come back, you'd be like, how's the bike? And you go, it's fine. So you might have one of those riders. And if that's the case, then you should just zip your mouth about the motorcycle most of your amateur career, because your kid doesn't care. Doesn't matter what you put under him. He's just not that type of kid. But if you got a kid that really needs his bar height set, I mean, we don't even talk about that on the show yet, but rolling your bars forward, rolling your bars back, which bars do you run and why? Like go through a couple bars, see what looks right. Is your kid growing a lot? Maybe you need a little taller bar. If your kid's really short and little for the next bigger bike, maybe you need a little low bar, right? So those are the things that you really can do now, because you have a block of time. And like you said, if there's little local races around, you can go put them to the test. How does it crack? How does it shake up on local race day? So those are great things. On your side of things, you said this is probably, obviously the quote unquote taking the time off, you said, is probably the most important thing, because you have to. But now the preseason really is starting your season. So how does that start for you?
This is a really interesting question. And I want to bounce back to what you just said. And I hope everybody has the opportunity to please pause this and go back and listen to what Derek just mentioned, because I think there's a tremendous amount of meat on the bone. And when you listen to what everything Derek just said, you've got a 65 rider, or maybe you have a very young, almost a novice level 85 rider. We know that today's generation is not very good at communicating, right? This isn't a slam on society, but the reality is most kids do not know how to articulate thoughts, feelings, emotions. Now, the reason why I bring it up in this context is if you go back and you listen to what Derek just said, your son or daughter is out there riding a bike and they can tell you what they like. Then when you call up somebody like Derek, you can say, my son or daughter likes the bike to hit hard, pull long in the tooth. All right, great. We now know what the characteristics of the motor are. Derek can build a motor to match that. Okay. What about the setup? Oh, he likes it when it, like we hear Tomac talks about when he gets on the gas, he likes the rear end to sit a little bit. Now, granted, that's at a very elite level. Tomac can make those types of comments. But when you're going to solicit the advice of somebody like Derek for suspension and motor, and the more that you can tell the builder what your rider likes, do you see how it's easier for the builder to build what your rider likes versus you're coming in as a parent and it's almost like you want Derek to guess what your rider likes. So the sooner you get your athlete to give feedback in all conditions, the notes that Derek was talking about, you say to Derek, my son or daughter likes these characteristics. Well, Derek knows how to build a motor to complement the suspension. The suspension complements the motor to match what your athlete said he or she likes. And I think that's something that's so overlooked. I know it's hard. Anybody who's listening to this that I talk to on a weekly basis, I always compliment the young athletes. I'm going to ask you hard questions because I need, number one, I need the gears in your brain to be moving. I know you don't know how to answer the question, but try. You've got your parents sitting there right there with you because mom and dad, when you're, and I hate to use the word force, but you're encouraging your athlete to give feedback, which is very uncomfortable for them. The more they do it, the better they get. The more they do it, the more that we all learn, the quicker you accelerate as an athlete.
Well,
So
yeah,
what you just
you're
said
dead on right
was
that, right?
priceless. Yeah.
If you take a pro and it's funny, all the veterans say it now. And the quote unquote veterans, 22-year-olds, 24-year-olds, whatever, right? But they're like, yeah, like Joe Shimoda had a great podcast. When I was at PC, here's your bike. Maybe you have two options. Somebody already went through the testing and you were young and it's a factory bike. It was a good bike.
Yep.
Coming out of amateurs, anything you ride, you're like, oh man, these bikes are great.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Honda and Honda's like, what do you like, Joe?
Oh.
Joe's like, I like the Pro Circuit Kawasaki I was riding. And Honda's like, yeah, but what do you like? We'll do whatever you want. And he said, that was, you can watch that. And if you go back, you watch his Honda career, you can watch the building process that has happened over there to culminate in the Joe Shimoda we saw this year, which of course he was hurt, but he's been really good. Right.
Yeah.
And he's had to learn what he's liked. Well, imagine if Joe, and granted, he's got a big language barrier, so it's even harder for him. But imagine if Joe had started that process in 85s. And he goes to Honda and on day one, because Honda thought they're getting, Honda doesn't know what they're getting. They assume that they're getting a guy who knows what he wants. So if he'd been ready to go on day one, Honda would have been much happier. He'd have been better and upfront right away. And now I guarantee you what sucks for Honda is if Joe left, I don't know the contract situation this year. Whatever team he goes to, Honda's the one that paid the price for educating Joe. And now he's going to kind of sort of know the testing process for this next team if he's moving, right? If he moves on to 450s, whatever it is, he now, so as a parent, if you want your kid to be successful, and this is what I always say, this is the frustrating part. If you want your kid to be successful from bottom to top, and I don't care if this is your local race, all the way through Loretta's, all the way to pro, all the way to, factory level, the sooner and earlier they can communicate well what it is that they're looking for or feeling or chasing or looking. They don't know the answer. They don't need to know the answer. Don't tell your suspension guy it needs to be stiffer. Tell your suspension guy what it feels like.
Yeah.
So that's the key. So I think this process is really overlooked, and especially nowadays. I mean, what do they call it? Helicopter parents. What what the expression is? Where like, mom and dad do the kids' homework, and mom and dad do the kids' college essays, and mom and dad do the applications, and mom and dad micromanage this kid's life. Every single day to the point where the kid gets out on his own and doesn't do laundry, doesn't know how to cook food, doesn't know how to write an essay, doesn't know how to do homework, because mom and dad wanted the kid to be so successful that they just did everything for the kid because they were better at it. No, you need to let your kid toil through these struggles young, because as he gets older, he's going to have the skill sets. And the younger that you can kind of put this on their plate, the better. And that has to happen when it's not important to you. You can't just start doing this at Loretta's. Well, how's the bike? Well, let's go talk about it. Let's walk down to Factory Connection or a Race Tech and let's go tell them what you think. And the kid's like, I suck today. It's rough out there. Can you fix it? And they're like, give me all your money.
Yeah.
Sure, here you go. And then he doesn't do any better and you still sucked and you go home and you're like, well, at least we got the suspension figured out. And then he grows 6 inches and gains 30 pounds. And then you do it all over again next year at Loretta's. No, now's the time you get the opportunity to really work on this stuff. And so teach your kid how to do it. You'll be happy about it because this doesn't apply just to moto, right? If he can be, what is it? Learn how to learn and you're never going to be an idiot. So
That's right. Well, and again, you keep throwing some big nuggets out there. I can't bypass them. Remember, and depending on hopefully this, people who go back and listen to this, it might be 10 years after we've recorded this, but we're recording at the end of 2025. And at the beginning of this year, Jet was shaking down a new platform on the Honda. And I just remember one of the most profound things that came out of his mouth was, and this was in Supercross, we finally got the bike to where now I can just start riding it and we're not working on setting it up. And I don't know how many people really keyed in on that comment, but it validates everything that you just said, Derek. It's like people don't realize, they're not constantly, sure, they're always fine tuning, but those big adjustments, those big platform changes, they're just trying to get a baseline. And again, I do give Jet credit, Dazzy, Hunter, that whole trio between the three of them. How many times have we heard Jet say, the bike's never going to be perfect? And I was like, thank goodness somebody's had the balls to say something like that, because you're thinking HRC, that thing's going to be magical everywhere. And Jet's very vocal. We know we give up some over here to gain some over here, whether it's tire selection, suspension settings. And then like Jet says, Dad just tells me, you got to figure out how to ride it. Especially now at the pro level, like SMX, where you do have legitimate hybrid tracks designed and intentionally.
yeah, there's no such thing as a great bike on that track.
Think about how powerful that is. Not only are these guys bad mofos on a regular basis, take the track, mix up the dirt types in less than 2 minutes, choose your tire selection, set your suspension, and good luck trying to go fast.
Yeah, let's have outdoor motocross track with supercross obstacles on it. And the suspension just flat out will not be great everywhere. It just won't. And that's, going back to Caden, he was a rookie, raced all the SMX rounds on a full private bike. Because it was a full private bike and the funding was good, but like it's hard to put all the pieces of the puzzle together in a short time, right? The team was not, it built itself into a team very rapidly. So it didn't have an on-site in-house suspension guy, right? Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. So he showed up at the SMX with what was essentially outdoor suspension, thinking, okay, it's going to be hybrid. We're going to run slightly stiffer outdoor stuff. And basically needed to be riding supercross suspension. That's kind of what all the other teams ended up doing. But like Chase did this, he was training with Chase a little bit at the time. So that's what Chase decided to do. And, Chase knows better than he would know. So, okay, that's how we're going to set our bike up. And then you show up and Chase is scrambling, having the suspension guy throw on, supercross settings. And then they're changing settings between motos, trying to get this bike right. And here's Caden with the exact same suspension he started the entire weekend with. Oh, well, you can click it. And then he didn't have the resource all the way through the rounds. You don't know that, and this is a flaw in the SMX, but they don't really publicize how the jumps are really going to be. They'd have the track maps, which is great, but it's like, you don't know until you get there. So that very final round he went to was a pure supercross track, and, not pure, but very, very close. And, we were bitching at him about some corner stuff that he just wasn't doing great. We're like, dude, what? So we got the camera guy out, right? I always say, go film. And he's like, he was saying, look, I can't do it. I don't know why I can't do it. I cannot do what you're asking me to do. Something's up. Like, I just cannot do it. I can't make that motorcycle do that. We get the camera guy out. He gets the slow-mo out, zoomed in on a couple sections for practice. By the way, you should always be doing that. And I was like, after first practice, I'm like, well, then, the team had a camera guy. I'm like, go film Caden in practice, please, so we can go look at, this. And he said, oh, yeah, sweet. Good idea. Wow, imagine that, right? So he goes to this corner, and we're starting to study the slow-mo. And it's a bowl turn. It's a rhythm into a bowl into the finish line at what the Coliseum was. And he's standing up. He had to stand up because his bike was bottomed out from the second he landed the jump all the way through mid corner. He's just basically, if he moved his foot over 2 inches, he'd be dragging his foot on the dirt. And then, of course, what happens when it finally releases is that it pops the suspension out, right? So he couldn't get the bike to do what he needed to do because we wanted him to turn down. And I'm like, turn. Oh, wow. Well, we ain't clicking that. Like, no wonder you can't do that, you know? And of course, you film other guys too, and you're like, their bike's already recovered. It's out on the travel because they came with supercross suspension and he just didn't have that resource. But the point is, I don't care how bad your bike is or how good your bike is. These pros are making that bike work in SMX. And you need to make whatever motorcycle you have work on race day. But now you get the opportunity to, to make that a little bit better because you have this quote unquote off season. And as an amateur, you're not truly, a young amateur, especially truly focused on supercross. So,
well, and this is where the other nugget, and this is a great extension of what you just said. You alluded to it earlier, and I want to make sure that we don't miss it. I understand. As parents, we want more for our kids than we had. Derek, you and I have talked about it, right? But this idea, and I'm going to be very blunt, and if it comes across crass, I apologize, but the wealthier the parent, the worse the child is. Because we have factory riders out there that have never tightened a chain or changed an air filter. It blows my mind. You talk about these riders that grow up in, I could think of some Team Green riders that have had tremendous support since they were on 65s. And then to your point, when adversity set in, they didn't really have that ability to bounce back from it because their entire amateur career, the trajectory was up and to the right. When you're talking about setting it, and this is where I'm going to get in trouble with moto dads in particular, right? When you're in the preseason phase and you're going to the races, and to your point, Derek, we're going to this track and we're working on nothing but setting the bike up. And we're putting, we're clicking in, we're backing out, we're doing all kinds of different things. And to your point, now the feet are dragging in the corners and your rider can only push the bike so hard without putting him or herself on the ground. That's where that open communication needs to come in. It's like, what are we here for? We're trying to figure out, and you just did a great job of explaining. It took a whole team to think about, it was your idea to look at the filming, but then when you looked at the filming, you were able to explain what the bike was or wasn't doing, which validated what Caden was doing and why he couldn't rail the corner like everybody else. It's not a skill set. It's a bike setup. Well, if the bike's not going to drag in that corner, that means he's giving up something somewhere else on the track. And that's where, and again, not to throw moto parents under the bus, but it's like, Derek, I've been on public record of saying this, and I'll reiterate it here today. A line choice cannot be both brilliant and asinine at the same time. So like and I use the same example every time, when we were at Mini O's one year in Supercross, it was when they had always a very short start, right-hand turn, but it went right immediately into a left. The inside rut was so deep, Super Minis, the pegs were dragging. We told our rider, don't follow. So he gets a third place start, follows number 1 and 2 in the inside. First place guy stalls a bike. The rut's so deep, he can't pick the bike out of it. So our rider sitting in third gets collected. We come out of that second turn in like 22nd place. Where if my rider had gone out of the first turn, went out in the marbles, right? Stupid line choice. He's out in the marbles and those guys collect each other on the inside. It would be a brilliant move. Hey, dude, you didn't follow. You went in third. You came out first. Good job. But then if your rider goes out in the marbles and the top 3 dudes come in and they rail the inside and your rider goes in 4th and comes out 9th, it can't be both a brilliant and an asinine line. If you're telling your rider not to follow and he's not following or she's not following, sometimes you give up some spots because you're just jockeying.
Yeah, so it's like a law of averages, right? You have to play the law of averages.
Well, and this is why I challenge all of my athletes, and I would challenge our listeners, learn to be fast in a non-optimum line. You get to a certain point, most everybody can go fast in a main line. I love Tomac in this. Tell Tomac this track is unpassable.
Yeah.
And then just sit back and get your popcorn out.
Or Jet, right? Or Cooper.
Yeah, he's going to be 1 or 2 gears higher. Yeah. He's going to go the longer way around the track. That's called gear inches. He's not giving up that speed, right? He's not, and parents, please pay attention to this. If you've got inside lane 1, middle lane 2, and outside lane 3, make sure your athlete's not in second gear going in lane 3. He's going a further distance in a gear too low. Gear selection has to match your line.
Yeah, you can't hit a tight inside in a corner and that needs second to not completely die, so low in RPM it stalls. but then go around a long sweeping outside in the same corner and also hit it in second. Like that makes sense.
Exactly. But this is where we're back to the knowledge and the education. I would be willing to wager. I've never even bought a lottery ticket in my life. I'm too much of a tightwad. I'm willing to wager $100 bill that if you asked any young athlete listening to this show, talk to me about gear inches, I'd be very surprised if you get one that knows what that means. But yet, if we're riding bicycles together and all of a sudden you make your gear one gear harder at the same RPMs, you're just going to ride away from me. And I always say to the young riders, think about when you leave your parents' pit. What do? You grab a shift and it speeds up. You grab a shift and you're going through the pits at 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, I wish I could get on that soapbox all day, right? I've been on this show. Shift your damn motorcycle if you want to go faster. Actually, there's a great video. The Short family, the kid just posted a video at Oak Hill. They have a pretty big step up that's, depending on the day, the dirt, the face, pretty hard to get on a 125 or a super mini, next to very, very challenging. And I'm watching this video and he's like wide open down the straightaway to the face and barely, I think he clips it a little bit. It's just, he recently posted it.
Okay.
But I was watching the video and of course it's me going shift,
yeah.
shift. The bike's already at the end of the power. Now, granted, I'm not there. I'd have to ride and try to grab that shift to make sure the bike will pull it. But grab the shift. Oh, it bogged. Okay, I'm not going to do the jump. But I promise you, from what I saw, the bike just flat out was out of RPM. Two strokes don't have a rev limiter. The VFI bikes do. But if you're that high in the RPMs, they're already way past the power they have. So it'd be interesting. I wish I was there that day to say, hey, I'd like to see if you could shift one more gear and tell me what happens. And I think you would have just sailed the jump, right? I think you would have done it very easily. But it's hard to tell kids this and parents this. And you just nailed it. It's gear inches. If the bike's capable of going faster, well, why not make it go faster? The only way to do that is to upshift.
Well, and then let's take this and go the other direction. Because again, you're throwing nuggets out there and again, anyone who's been with me at a performance camp, this should sound familiar. And this is literally the first time Derek and I have talked about it together. Derek, this is one of my things when I do a performance camp. I always tell parents, I will make your athlete faster. My concern is, are you strong enough? Are you fit enough to manage the increased speed? I'm always deathly afraid on day 2 of a 3-day camp, because if they didn't recover and they're tired and they're not in shape, that speed's going to be dangerous. So it's always a double-edged sword. Again, something that I want to unpack that you just mentioned. This goes back to what you were saying earlier, communication. Hey, buddy, you just got a brand new bike from HP, right? This bike is going to pull to the stratosphere. Let's assume, and we'll get into it here a little bit, when to shift the bike, and it's always in the power band. It's never hit the point of diminishing returns and starting to sign off. You've already figured that out in the off season.
And we talked about that in a previous episode. Go ride your bike on a straightaway in a field and learn how to shift it.
And please know how to shift it. So when you're clipping the rear wheel, first thought should be, can I grab an extra gear? If I hit it 3 miles an hour faster, I'm going to go a little further. And then before you do it, make sure you know what's on the other side, because you're going to be landing it at 5 to 10 miles an hour quicker because you butter the backside. Then that's what puts you in the next danger zone, because it's a rhythm section, and then you cartwheel. That's not a good ROI. But here's where I want to back the train up just a little bit. When your rider's bike has 3 hours on it versus 33 hours on it, the bike isn't the same bike. And this is the problem, in no disrespect to the younger kids, but if you tell them, hey, look, if you hit that in 4th gear, it'll clear it. Well, that was when the bike had 3 hours on it. Now the bike has 33 hours on it, and you told the little guy in a 65, if you hit that in 4th gear, you can clear it. No, you can't. It's not the same bike. Now, and I've said this to every parent I work with, what I love about our sport is our little guys, and when I say little guys, all the way up to the 125s, I mean, all you guys are, in my opinion, still young and developing. You've got a whole career ahead of you. It's exciting. The problem is we're asking them to understand physics. We're asking them to understand physiology. We're asking them to understand engineering, gear inches, hours on a motor, sensing when it's not as powerful as it used to be, what it can and can't do in these conditions. Like you said, going to the track, looking at dirt type, face. Think about putting that inside an 8, 9, 10-year-old.
Oh, it's so hard, right?
Impressive.
It is. Yeah. Not enough credit to them for sure. Right. Not enough.
That's where, to your point, communicate, document, and then call someone like yourself, because it's a collective effort. And
you got to have a team, right? You got to have a team.
Well, you walk up to whatever your favorite color team is, right? Imagine walking up to that awning, and I want you to stop and think about what that awning, just underneath the awning, what does that represent? Truck driver got it there. got it cleaned, stocked everything for the race, hospitality, mechanics, staff. It's got to be washed. Awning's got to be set up. It's got to be pristine. Then each mechanic's got his own box, each pad, each bike. Think about everybody's role and responsibility. And you as parents, you're doing all of it. Plus,
Right. You're doing
financer.
all of it. Right. Yeah.
All
It's
of it.
not, it's not
You had to
easy.
drive
So,
all night long.
Yep.
You had to set everything up. Now think about the rider, right? Tomac flies in his private jet. He gets ushered over to his motorhome that's sitting adjacent to the factory rig that's been sitting there. He walks around the corner. His gear's handed to him in his motorhome. He goes, they set the sag on the bike, mechanic, bike's already there, brand new tires, suspension company, tire company, gear company, mechanic, bike is sitting there. You set sag, you go out, you do 4 laps, you pull in the pit, you tell the mechanic what you like. There's a point for saying that. You make the adjustment, he goes back out, practice is over, he puts it on the stand, walks right about the rig, goes back into his motorhome. Mom and dad, you're doing all that. You're adjusting the seat, you're checking the oil, you're checking gas, you're checking everything. Plus you're trying to be cheerleader and your financer and your truck driver and your filmer. And you wonder why parents are overwhelmed. Now, again, we get it.
And he got a job. You know?
John Tomac did it for years.
Yeah.
Alan C did it for years, right? Mike Alessi, Tony Alessi did it for years and did it for 2 guys, right? So that's why we have mad respect for you. But sometimes we step over $1 to pick up a penny.
Right.
And that's where not knowing when to shift your bike or not reminding your athlete, this is not a fresh bike anymore. Derek, we talked about this at Loretta's. You got a brand new bike with the 4.5-inch knobbies. It's going to accelerate completely different than that bike that you've got where you've turned the tire backwards to get more miles out of that rubber tire.
Yeah, this tire's still good.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you wonder why you loop out Larry on the start. Well, you didn't practice with a brand new tire. You didn't move your bum far enough forward to get enough wheel spin. You put his bum where you had a tired tire.
Yeah.
And then he's loop out Larry or he's triple clutching off the start and you're pissed off.
Yeah. So
all that quickly. I said that
all
on
in
purpose because you said it in that little nutshell. It goes back to communicate.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy, right? And this, I don't think parents have like stepped back till a lot of them looked at all this. You got to step back and look at it. So
I respect all of them so much.
So on the physiological side, all right, so we've got our preseason. What are you looking for? Like, what is the number one takeaway in this preseason physiologically? What are we trying to do?
Preseason, and again, thank you, Derek. Write this down and commit it to memory. Your preseason's focus is to get as strong as you physically can and build the biggest aerobic engine that you can. When you look at the idea, and we've used this illustration on the show, if we're going to drag race and I offer you a 65 or a 450, every single person, if there's money on the line, is going to choose a 450. I ask why, and everyone says the same thing. It's faster. Okay, why is it faster? It's got a bigger piston. Let's assume there's no EFIs. It's a carbureted motor. It's got a bigger carburetor. Okay, well, your strength base is your piston and your carburetor is your aerobic engine. So everybody wants to go fast, let's say from June through August at the national championships, but nobody's willing to take the time to establish the foundation to go fast. So this is where preseason, and this we go back and tie 2 concepts together. 6 months is your magic number. So when we get to June and July, when everybody's in their, biggest work mode, getting ready for national championships, the work that you did 6 months previous is the foundation you're working off of. So number 1, during preseason, understand if your athlete is trying to put on muscle, and I want to make sure, Derek, that we don't bypass this because we have to talk about kids who have not hit puberty yet.
Right.
That's a completely different story, but not dramatically different. And those who have hit puberty. The bottom line is, think about the integrity from the bone, tendons, ligaments, and muscles, literally go from inside and go out. This is your opportunity to build integrity. Your 4th gear wide open, hit a kicker, and you get thrown off the bike. The work you've done 6 months ago is going to allow you to have thick enough bones that they don't break.
And let's
just strength.
And I'm going to just throw in an example of that. He's genetically special in this regard, but it's Chase Sexton. I don't know, his work program and all that stuff, but the kid is built like a brick shithouse.
Yep.
And look at the crashes that guy's taken. I've never seen somebody hit the ground so hard and not just be done. So he is a rock solid, but that doesn't happen. That has been years of effort and building and off-season work and whatever, because he's not doing it in season. So your parents need to understand. And what I'm getting at is that's the value of this type of work, is build yourself up, get strong. And like you said, I don't want to gloss over to, as you weight train, it's building the bone, the ligament, the muscle, the connection. So like all of that gets strengthened over time when you do the weights. So that's kind of the key. Right.
It's
right. They all build on top. It's like well, they're all on top of each other, right? They're not on top, but yeah.
But you're exactly right. Think about it literally in layers, right? We look at the skin and then the muscles. Then we look at, and I get this question all the time. I can't remember the difference between a ligament and a tendon. I always want you to think about when somebody says they torn their knee, they'll say, I tore my ACL. That's bone to bone ligament. Tendon is going to be muscle to bone. So if you're worried, if you get a little bit confused, just remember, hey, if you tore your ACL, that would be a ligament. Those are bones to bones. So this is why the complementary of strength training, and when I use strength training, don't visualize a big bodybuilder. Strength training for somebody who's not hit puberty could be pull-ups and jumping jacks and a jump rope. We are in a sport that pushes and pulls a bike that weighs a lot more than a BMX bike at velocity and speed, hitting obstacles on a track. You cannot put our motocross racers in the same category as a ball and stick sport athlete. You're comparing apples and zebras. Now, we don't want to be remiss and say, oh, yeah, put your son or daughter under a strength program, and then you end up jeopardizing the growth plates. You don't want to do that either. That's our job as a physiology company, is how much is too much and how much is we need to be doing a little bit more. So, Derek, when you come back to what we were talking about, when you lift weights, the bone density increases. A lot of people don't realize this. People think bone is solid like wood. If you look at bone under a microscope, it's actually very porous. It's actually in the blood family. It's not a solid piece like people think. Then you have the ligaments that attach bone to bone, and then tendons attach the muscles to the bone. And then you have the muscles themselves. How many times have you seen somebody get a muscle tear? Strength training minimizes that. Strength training increases the integrity of the ligaments and tendons in case you have that high-speed yard dart, you get ragdolled down the track. Or, hate to use it, quick stops.
Yeah.
Joking aside, right?
Yeah.
We always say it's not the get off that hurts you, it's the quick stop that
it is 100%. It's the G loads, right? So
it is. All joking aside, right? James Stewart likes to joke about it, and I love his jokes, but it's the quick stop that does the damage, not getting thrown off the bike.
And that's, so now you're talking about like building the ligaments. And just as an aside to this, I don't know how I came across it, but the world's strongest competition guys, right? And there's a guy named Brian Shaw, and he had to have like some kind of wrist surgery or something. I don't know how I saw this video, but the surgeon was like, this guy is like damn near 7 foot. I don't know how big he is, right? He's 400 pounds or whatever he is. And he's a world's strongest man. I mean, he's so big that because he looks proportionately like a giant, but you can't really tell till you see him next to somebody you think is really big, right? Like he makes Mr. Olympias look like shrimps. He's just massive. There's a photo of that floating around where he's just a massive human being. Well, they were doing like a wrist surgery, and the surgeon, I think they had a picture of it too, but the surgeon's like, yeah, his tendons or whatever, or ligaments, whatever it was, he's like, those are about 3 times the size of even a well-trained athlete. But that's because he's all just lifted heavy weights for a really, 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 really long time. And those have all had to develop. And then they recently did like a DEXA scan on him, or a body composition scan. And he had like
DEXA scan,
almost no body fat for what he is. You would think a guy that big, no, he's just rock solid with really dense bones. And he was like 1 in a whatever of bone density, like 1 in like 100 million people in bone density, because of probably, like you said, not probably, because of what you said, he's been loading himself.
And that's what we want the parents to that's what we want the parents to understand. When you're having your athlete, if they're prepubescent, pull-ups, push-ups, jump ropes, doing shuttle run on a pump bike, riding mountain bikes, just
trampolines up,
be a young little, trampoline, great one. Understand that the bones are developing on par with the ligaments, tendons, and the muscles. This is why performance-enhancing drugs are so dangerous, is because the muscle will grow at a rate that leaves the tendons and ligaments behind. You end up with an injury. This is more for the parents. Obviously, this is an amateur, and I know we have some vet riders, but one of the number one catalysts for arm pump is synthetic testosterone. And all it is think about sausage casings. The muscles inside your arm, right? They're not going to expand, but the blood flowing through it, because the increased testosterone, it's like hooking a water hose up to a fire hydrant, right? You've got more volume pushing through, and unfortunately, the arm does not expand, and that's why you feel like you could pop it. We could do an entire show on performance-enhancing drugs, synthetic testosterone, human growth hormone. And when I say performance-enhancing drugs, that's become a little bit of a convoluted conversation. because you get into the argument, is a BPC 157 a peptide? Is that now considered a performance enhancing drug? Like I said, we do an entire show on it. And if you guys want to leave us a comment, if that's something you want us to dive into, we can talk about it, just like Derek can talk about running a 144 sleeve kit and a 125. I mean, we could talk about those types of things. And we'll be very honest with you. We'll talk about the pros and the cons. Why would someone want to do it? And what's the negative side effect to doing it?
I'm not going to say the class, and I'm not
Okay.
going to say anything other than that. But so we've never cheated at a high level of racing, like ever done it. Nobody that we've ever won with, nobody that we've ever been in sniffing the top 10 with, anybody, like, we've never done it. And it's just never been, for me, it's not worth it, right? If your kid can't win at the amateur level legit, then he ain't going to win at the pro level legit. Now, this year I had a shop call me up, and we do sell a KTM 250F big bore kit that we sell. And I originally developed this kit years and years and years ago for a rich ER doctor. He's like, I really want one. This was 2016, essentially. So we did it. I've kept doing that package, right? I'm looking at results at Loretta's and more classes, and I'm like, I know that name. And like, I couldn't remember, right? And I go Google it, and I'm like, I got an email from that person. And I'm like, oh, sure as shit. Okay. You know, this particular individual happens to be doing, you know, a little something. And I know it happens. And, you know,
Sure.
Unfortunately, there's a lot more of it probably than what anybody would like to hope. But the point is, it's funny that I saw that. But on the flip side of that, that same individual is getting beat by, I think, 3 or 4 of my customers who are all legit. So, hey, and I don't even know their whole program. I don't even know them, right? I literally don't know them. It's just a shop did it, and then I got the name in the email. So I've never really contacted or been in contact with them directly. But long and short, like, they might just be like, man, we're just on a super simple budget. Just do that, throw it in there, and let's go ride. And you know, and they might be putting 50 hours of motor or whatever, right? Whereas these other clients I'm talking about are like, hey, we need a race motor for Loretta's, and it's gonna have 5 hours on it. You know, so it's a different level of things. I'm not, you know, but it was just funny to say that you know, like, there's people out there doing it, and there's not people doing it. So the same thing on the ped side, right? There's guys out there doing all sorts of stuff, and there's guys out there who are like, I just drink water, you know, like, they keep super simple.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second, because then we get into that slippery C word, confidence. So it's damn near impossible to do it with a human being, right? Because we don't take blood samples at amateur races and stuff like that. But let's talk about the breakdown process at a motocross race. So let's say you're running 144 sleeve kit. Maybe you're running a big bore 254 strip, whatever it may be. How embarrassing would it be, right? You're out there, you're running a 144, or I'm just going to call it a big.
Yeah, let's call it whatever.
Whether you want to talk 2-stroke or whatever, doesn't matter what the bike is. And you think because you got 3rd place and you know you're running something that's illegal and somebody beat you, so you pay for a breakdown and you find out the bike is absolutely legit. Think about what you just did to the confidence of that athlete. I can't even win on a cheater bike. And this is something, again, we've talked a lot about today about communication, managing expectations and all that. So this is where it becomes very dangerous. I own a supplement company, and I'll be the first person to tell you, please don't take supplements until we deem them necessary. And we do that very simply through blood work. If you're low on a certain micronutrient, vitamin B6 or B12, your energy vitamins, iron, necessary for carrying oxygen in the blood, zinc, iodine for your thyroid. If you're low on those on a blood work, right? We get your blood work, just for illustration purposes, we get your blood work done in January and you're low on those 5 items. All I'm going to recommend, no supplements. Eat more food that has that item in it, right? Because when you get your blood work, it's just a micronutrient recap of what the saturation point is in the blood. You're not in range. So if we're below range, start by eating more food. Do that for 3 more months. Redo your blood work. If you're still out of range, that's when I would recommend supplementation. Well, we're talking trying 6 months worth of work.
Right. This doesn't happen overnight.
Try supplements.
Right.
After we do that for 3 months, we do your blood work again, and man, you're still not in the ideal range. That's a gut absorption issue. That's 12 months right there, just to figure out why your B6, B12, iron, zinc, and iodine are out of range in January. This is why I always want to get in front of it, because if you don't get your blood work done for an extended period of time, if you're low in B6 and B12, and those are your energy producing vitamins, where will you be in June? Where will you be in December? And so an athlete doesn't realize, oh, it's not really, this is a double negative.
This is the preseason thing that we're talking about, though, right?
Right.
So here's my question for you. I don't know this answer. It's a great question you brought up. do you start this with young athletes, like young kids?
Absolutely. There's
Yeah,
more
so we
athletes
do. You do blood work with
Mhm.
young athletes.
Well,
Okay.
we own a company and 100% transparency, Complete Med Solutions. And the only reason, and I want to make sure if you're listening to this driving, please, I need your undivided attention. Every single product or service that you see that Complete Racing Solutions offers is because there was nobody else doing it. We started a sports drink company because there was no sports drink that matched intensity and duration. The molecule of carbohydrate needs to adjust based on how you're using it. Think about diesel fuel versus pump gas versus race gas. It has different purposes on how you're designing it. So you're building a human body. You need to make sure that your sports drink matches the intensity. You look at Complete Med Solutions. We started that because parents were saying, Rob, it's going to take me 8 months just to get in to see the doctor. I've got to go to a primary care. I got to get a referral. It takes 3 months to get the results back.
Yeah, that normal GP's like, well, you don't need to run blood work. He's a kid. What is he sick?
Problem,
right? No, he's not sick. Right.
Or you go to the GP and they're like, oh, you shouldn't race motocross. That's dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. Well,
Yep. So that was the genesis for energy fuel, recovery fuel, Complete Med Solutions. We have a performance suite where we measure blood lactate, we measure sweat rate, we measure core body temperature. Well, the reason why I do that is because athletes struggle with dealing with the heat. Take something like Loretta's. It's hot, it's humid, it's a 20-minute moto, it's 5 days of racing, high level. So yes, we have core body temperature sensors that we use, and we have a whole strategy on how we maintain core temperature. Then we look at Garmin on a daily basis to make sure the athletes are recovering. And guess what? We ended up with 2 national championships and 4 top 10s at Loretta's this year. What you put in dictates the output.
But that starts now, essentially. Like whenever this podcast drops,
Never too late to start.
Yeah, it's true too. Right.
Never too late to start.
If Loretta's is over, you should have taken a month off or more. Now's the preseason. And now, like you're saying, if we want our nutrition to be right, let's say we have deficiencies. We've identified this time off season. Now off season is a great time to do that, right? Go do some blood work, not do anything.
Well, you've got the least amount of load on the body because you're not racing every
right.
weekend.
So go get some blood work now and wait. And now you have time to look at it. And then you're like, oh, wow, we were a little deficient. Well, guess what? Now you have a year, like you just said, for Loretta's. Now we can hopefully make into that for next year. And that's something that's you have to do. That's why this off-season thing is important. And then what I would call, like you said, off-season into this, what we're calling preseason.
Yeah.
So you said
confidence.
Right.
This is where confidence comes in, though, because if you had a bad week at Loretta's, most people are going to go, we got to get in better shape. It might just be that you need to match up your B6 and B12 and get it in a range. Because think about it. Why would Derek's blood be void or low of B6, B12? Either you're not eating enough, you're burning it faster than you're getting it in, or you're not absorbing it. We just walked through that, but now zoom out. A lot of people think, oh, shoot, I got to get in better shape because I got tired in a 20-minute moto. And they've been going to the gym 3, 4, 5 days a week. They're riding 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week. No disrespect, but please listen. If you're riding I don't care if you're riding 1 day a week. I don't care if you're riding 3 days a week, 5 days a week. If you're going to the gym 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, you're talking you got tired in one 20-minute moto and you race 1 moto per day. You cannot say that you're not in shape. Everybody says they can be in better shape. I get that. But it was a 20-minute race. You didn't train for let's say you were training for the national championship. It wasn't like you were training for a 20-minute moto and you got there and they surprised you with a 3-hour moto. You see, joints?
Yeah, I totally agree. But the other side of that too is you can't tell me it can't be done. It's only 20 minutes. The pro level is 35. So it can be done. People are doing it, right? Mm-hmm. And like we've talked about earlier in the podcast, you got to set your sights maybe a little higher. And you said like the volume and the duration of motos that your guys can do. But if your kid can barely go the 20 and that coming into Loretta's and you're on 65s, 85s, whatever, now's this preseason. You know what you need to do. You need to address that issue because especially as you climb this ladder, you come out as an amateur and your kid can go the 25s, right? But barely. Well, how the hell is he going to go another 10? You have to be building towards that future. And so, from what I'm gathering here, you're saying, if I'm not mistaken, that, well, I would put it like this. You're saying we're building a foundation, correct? For this year. Essentially, that's what this preseason does. It builds your strength, your aerobic engine, which is, I believe, lower intensity, long duration cardio workouts. And obviously,
your aerobic engine is your carburetor. Your strength base is your piston.
Right.
So if I take a I'm going to go into the old two-stroke days. If I take a KX 500 or a Mako 490 and I put a 85 carb on it, the piston will never create its potential because of an insufficient amount of air and fuel. Now flip it. If I take a KX80 back in the days and I take a KX 500 carburetor, that 500 carburetor isn't going to make the 80 piston produce more power. There's a disjoint. There's
You
a
have to have
disconnect.
both work together, right? And
They
so
have to linearly grow. We say railroad track. Aerobic engine and strength base have to develop on par because you're only as strong as your weakest link. You build a race motor. Let's say you build a race 450 and you put a 65 chain on it and it keeps snapping. Is anybody surprised?
right.
So that's your tendons and your ligaments.
People need to understand that this base, this foundation, you build it now because you have the time and it's the types of workouts that you prescribe. It's a very specific type of work, but you don't lose it throughout the season. The nice thing about a base is that it just grows every year if you do the work right. So you can keep building this base, this foundation stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's how you become a pro. And that's how you become like a B class Loretta's into A class, into Outdoor National Pro, is that base process was building every single year. But I mean, you know it as well as I know it. I know enough about this physiological stuff to just be dangerous, luckily for being on the show, is that some of these people just race year round and it's high intensity year round and it's full blast year round. And so they've got this high end of their, they take 3 weeks off and the kid's like, oh, I lost so much fitness. You lost this little bit, like you have a knife and you're sharpening the edge every single week. But at the end of the day, you didn't, it was so thin and flimsy, it wasn't going to hold together. All you did was sharpen the edge. You took a couple weeks off and the edge gets dull and you're like, I lost everything. But when you have a really strong base, it's like, no, just a quick hone of the knife and away we go. And I think that people don't understand that. And I think that's why I was going to say earlier, why people don't take breaks. Let's say they did do a decent job of peaking. And the kid's like, man, I feel the best I've ever felt. Like I rode good at Loretta's and I feel good. I want to keep this ball rolling. Like, let's go do some riding. I'm riding awesome right now. But all of a sudden you burn yourself out in this off season because you've maintaining this peak for a long time by continuing to go because you feel good. So there's like a psychological challenge of saying, if you are at a good peak, you gotta take that break.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it seems counterintuitive. You're in the best shape of your life. You're going faster in August than you have all year long. You've hit that pinnacle and it seems counterintuitive to pump the brakes, pull the parachute. And we literally say with our clients, we need you to detrain. We need you to get out of shape. And no disrespect to moto parents, but that freaks them out. They're like, that does not make any sense. Well, go with me here. If you think about like a linear line and you're in your best form of the year, when you take an off season, you're not losing 100% of your fitness. You might lose, you might lose 3 or 4% of your fitness, and that's intended. But then when you start your next training phase, in a 6 to 8 week period, you'll actually catapult above where your end of season fitness was last year. So after just one training block, you will be fitter and faster than you were at the end of last year because you took the time off.
But that's it. They don't understand that. I guess let's try to use a razor analogy or like I'm flying an airplane. It takes a lot of gas and energy to get up to altitude. And then you're cruising along like, well, I took all this time to get up here. I don't want to go back down there. But eventually, if you try to stay up there too long, you're going to run out of gas. You got to come back down, and
this is where I need the parents to really, and when I say parents, we have some vet riders that follow this show because they're still, in the amateur program as well. Always think about it this way. When you don't allow yourself to elevate to the next level, this is what causes a lot of doubt. This is where confidence gets completely obliterated. No other sport under the sun thinks that they can maintain peak form, not for 1 month, not for 12 months, but for 15 years. Because if you take somebody who was a prodigy on a Team Green program in 2015, he is still trying to race at a pro level right now. He's never had a season off. From a 65 to racing at a pro level, he's never had any time off. Now, that's not my assumption. I've spoken to these parents. And they're like, dadgummit, we should have taken time off. My little Johnny is burnt out mentally. He's physically burnt out. He's injured all the time. Now we got Bloodwork back and he's got Epstein-Barr. And I've said this before, but I think it's worth reiterating right now. A fatigue-related disease is 100% avoidable. There is absolutely no excuse for Epstein-Barr, Addison's disease, or chronic fatigue. Because remember, And this is, again, something I want you to have in your notes. Think about this as a linear format. Cells make up tissue. Tissues make up organs. Organs make up a system. Think about that linearly. Well, when you go get your blood work drawn at a system level, the highest level, your system is diseased on something that's 100% avoidable. And where does that come from? Not eating enough and training too hard. And too hard can be training too long at too high of an intensity with not enough rest. Not enough. When I say rest, Derek, you and I are at the track and we're going to do 4 20-minute motos. I can do a 1-to-1, work 20 minutes, rest 20 minutes. I can do a 2-to-1, work 20 minutes, only rest 10 minutes. I can do a 4-to-1, do 20 minutes, only rest 5. I can make the workout difficult by making the workout longer, faster, or shorten the rest interval. When I talk about rest, I'm talking about getting enough food and getting enough sleep to offset the workload that you did. If there's an imbalance, you're on the fast track to adrenal fatigue.
Well, it's crazy.
Related disease.
I would love to wish I had this Garmin, back in the day, would have probably been pretty illuminating, but it's like, I especially as I've gotten older, so it's, just don't bounce back like I used to.
Sure.
But if you have a day of bad sleep, like terrible sleep, for whatever reason, you had terrible sleep, your heart rate was high, all those things, all the metrics. For me now, that takes like a focused effort of 3 or 4 days to recover back to, but when I have really good sleep, it's like that continues on. It's easier to maintain when your body's happy, and it's really hard to get your body back to happy when you've gone too far. And so like I've noticed, like we've had some events that I've been doing, and like it just kills me, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, man, it takes me a week just to get my resting heart rate back anywhere in the realm of normal for me. I was up at elevation doing an event. It was at, probably 9,000 feet, whatever. So I'm out of shape. So that was already stressing me. And then there's a lot of work, long days, and I actually rode motorcycles like for the first time in forever, which was fun. I did that like 3 days in a row. I rode motorcycles 3 days in a row, which one of the days damn near killed me. And I was like dying, dying. But my resting heart rate right now is like sub 50. And I was seeing 60 for like 3 or 4 days, which is like unheard of for me. And one night I think I never got below 65. Like I didn't even know my numbers could be so high.
But for the sake of the listeners, the reason why the resting heart rate would go from mid 50s to 65 is because at elevation, there's less oxygen. So the heart has to speed up to meet the oxygen demands of the muscle. See, that's what people don't realize. The demands of the muscle never change. Like if you pause this podcast and you went for a run, the muscles, the need for oxygen goes up. The availability of oxygen in the air is what makes it so difficult.
And that's the same with engines. That's why the bike can slow down.
Yes.
I was saying, so like, I'm like mid to high 40s if I'm like solid, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I came home and I was 60 something for like a week. And I was like, man, I got to figure this out. So I literally one day I was told who I'm dating. I was like, what are you doing today? I was like, I'm sleeping. What do you mean you're sleeping? I just lazed around all day. It was like a Sunday, and I never do that. And I needed to do it.
I want the listeners to think about the tail of the snake, right? The head is up at 9,000 feet. You rode for 3 days. Then you come back to sea level and all of a sudden you take that stress off the body. The tail of the snake has to catch up before all the metrics will measure. This is why we always say, you've got to think about this like a seesaw or a teeter-totter. Stress is on one side, recovery is on the other. There are so many people, and this is what I love about athletics, is unfortunately we get comfortable being miserable all the time. We think that unless we're physically sore or we're always exhausted, that we're not putting in enough work. And if I get you to put that into mechanical terms, if you only wanted to ride a motorcycle when it had 100 hours on it, when you only wanted to ride a motorcycle with a rusty chain, if you only wanted to ride a motorcycle with torn out tires, would you really enjoy it as much as when it's fresh and peppy and all? Of course not. But to your point exactly, we desensitize ourselves and it becomes our new norm.
No pain, no gain, and all that.
I will say this, it sounds a little bit arrogant, but this is kind of like our secret sauce,
right?
If you're a listener of this and you're running yourself or your athlete into the ground, it makes it so easy for my athletes to beat you because we're just simply rested. You may have way more talent than my rider may have, but we're rested. I go back to a motorcycle. Would you rather pull up to the national championships with a bike with 103 hours on it or a bike that has 3? And everyone, of course, would say 3 because we're talking mechanical terms. You put it in physiology, use a few new words, and people go, oh, it's too complicated. I'm out. I'm like, really? It's fundamental.
Yeah.
It's very fundamental.
It's like, yeah, I shipped out to Loretta's and I put street tires in the bike. Well, actually, my knobbies were so worn down, but we're just
Right.
gonna go race that.
You're going to go race it. Well, and again, I say this respectfully. If we were to do a survey, how many people know the characteristics of Loretta's? Or if we ask them to describe the characteristics of Loretta's, 20-minute moto, 103, 105 on the track. Humidity is usually about 95 to 100%. And it's going to stay that way for 6 days. And the only caveat is it might rain. And then we have the mud race, which makes the bikes even heavier. Okay. My athletes who just finished coming off of an off season are already training for those characteristics in August. We don't wait until June. Now, I just let out probably one of our biggest Coca-Cola syrup strategies and why we have 419 amateur titles, because the facilities do it the exact opposite. And unfortunately, they're going against the principles of physiology. And that's the part that just dumbfounds me at the end of the day. How many more years in a row are we going to see the same results, right? You have athletes and their parents. And when I say athletes, the vet riders are still trying to qualify for national championships as well. But think about it. You're going and you're training a 5 to 6 minute moto from literally November at Mini O's, and then take all the races in between, Daytona, Spring Nationals. But along the line, you start adding areas and regionals, and everybody's doing sprint. They finally punch their card, and they've got 4 to 6 weeks to build a base to go race 20-minute motos at Loretta's. You've already missed the train, sailed.
Luckily I just lucked into some fitness stuff, right? I kind of figured some things out and obviously researched, but one of the things I learned was let's say I was off, once you build a really strong base, right? Mm-hmm. And you've taught your body how to go 35 minutes on a motorcycle. So like you can actually, that's actually in my mind is a mental process. It's not just a physical. It's like teaching yourself to go the distance, what your body limits are. Okay, this is my zone that I need to stay in. You got to figure that stuff out. The hydration, the whole 9 yards. There's the mental like grit. It's hard to ride a motorcycle for 35 minutes. Even if physiologically you can do it, it's like, I got to stay focused for 35 minutes. That's a challenge. So, but once you've figured all that stuff out, your fitness is pretty good. When you take time off, like let's say you take a little bit of time off, you come back, that base doesn't go away. I can still hop on and go 35. I just can't quite do it at the intensity that I was peaked at. But a lot of families don't understand. If your kid takes time off and all of a sudden he's like, I got 3 laps in me and I'm wasted. And it's like, dude, because you don't have a base. And so this is the problem. So you can train and train and train. And now you can get that 5, 6, 7 laps because you're really on that razor's edge, but that's all you got. So I think that like you said, and I don't want to take a shot at facilities like we talked about, but I want parents to understand that we're in America. This is a business focused country. Part of the reason that this exists at the facility level is why they're a business like anything else, right? I'm a business, but at the end of the day, their busy season is usually pre-Loretta's. Oh, well, summer's out. We came in and they're catering to the demand that they get. And a lot of you parents are like, well, now we got time to ride. So we need to ride. We need to do motos. And so they do that. But unfortunately, you as a parent need to understand that just because that's what they do, and that's because that's how they pay their bills, it doesn't make it the right way to go. And that's not a knock, right? It's just these guys are trying to stay afloat. It's hard to run a facility.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely not a knock. And I want you to go back to Instagram and go look at all the facilities who said the grind begins.
Right.
They'll show some
every single one of them
tickets. Yeah. They've got their 2 tickets. And what do they say? Let the grind begin. We're grinding this summer. We're grinding it out. Should be doing the opposite. You should be doing short, quick stuff, working on your sprint speed, dialing in your skills and drills, get your starts dialed, because you're working on a foundation that was established 8 months ago that you're like, okay, it's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. I've got a 20-minute moto 1 day a week. If I qualified for 2 classes, I've got 20-minute moto. I've got 2 motos with about 5 hours, if not 6 in between. If you've been training for 8 months, I think you can do 2 20-minute motos with a 5-hour break. Remember we said earlier, duration, intensity, rest interval. Well, if you're racing 1 moto in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, you've got 5 hours. You have plenty of time to recover. If you know how to maintain core body temperature, the heat and humidity doesn't wax you. If you know how to pace yourself, you know what your anaerobic threshold is at, you know how to race right below it. Even without a watch, all of our athletes use the watch during the race, but the point being is the athletes, we do what we call non-electronic days where they have to go ride without it. And what we do is they still have it. They just can't see it. And we say,
but I
go
think
off of
people
your
need to understand that.
Well,
Pre-data era, you have to
break.
know your body, right?
Mhm.
You have to know it. It's a feel.
Yeah. Well, and that's what
And
I find.
maybe I'm wrong. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Your lactic threshold number varies day to day. Like it could be a beat or two. So you can't just use the number. There's a lot of feel aspect in it. There's days you're a little weak and there's days you're a little strong. And then the heat and all those little
Most
factors.
important part to what you're saying is always ask why. If
Right.
you're feeling off today, why?
Right.
Like you said, your sleep was horrible. As dumb as it sounds, I've seen people that have eaten a jalapeno pepper and can't sleep, right?
Yeah.
Because something messed up in their system. And it's not that they did anything wrong. It's just they ate something that didn't cooperate with their body. I'm never going to judge if you went out and drank too much last night. I don't care. We've all done it, right? The point is, do you know why? Like it's a double negative once again that equals a positive. If you didn't drink heavily last night and you didn't drink or eat a jalapeno pepper and you didn't have good sleep, we need to know why. Now, in my wheelhouse, what I always look at is, and this is for the parents of young athletes, I need to know where's that fine line between they're doing too much and they're doing too much and can't absorb versus they're doing enough and they can absorb. That's where our little sweet spot comes in. And we have a whole process and a system that we use with every athlete. That's how we can ensure that your athlete will never overtrain with us. We've been fired because a moto parent would say, you're not busting my little Johnny's balls hard enough. And I'm like, but I've shown you 453 times that when we go with that little bit of extra based on his age, body composition, school level, responsibilities at home, all that goes into it, if we do add that one extra moto, we add that one extra hour, we've got enough documentation that your athlete just can't absorb it yet. Doesn't mean he's not capable. It's just his current level of threshold is not there yet.
What was your expression? You can only train what you can recover or something like that?
The definition of overtraining is not how much you do, but your ability to absorb from the work that you can.
Right. Working
You've
you
got
can
professional triathletes that do 45 hours a week. We have world championships in Nice next weekend. We have triathletes that do 45 hours a week and no signs of overtraining.
I was going to ask you on that question. You have metrics, obviously, that can tell you when they're overtrained, undertrained. I'm assuming that slowly, wherever they're at, if you do it correctly, it just builds. The volume capability builds, right?
It's like AI. The more you use it, the more it knows about you, the better and more accurate the data gets. Every single day that you wear the Garmin, your data is going to a server and it's building a profile about you. So for example, and I know if you don't wear a Garmin, and by the way, I'm not paid by Garmin. I'm not on salary with Bar. I don't get a kickback from Garmin. I use Garmin because it's the best resource for the end user. Garmin is one of the few platforms that if I'm talking to you, Derek, you can be logged into your account and I can be at the same time. And we're literally seeing, Derek, when you were out there doing those testings with Taco, right? You could literally hit the sync button on your watch or your phone and you could call me and I in real time could see what you just did.
Right.
Not all platforms allow you to do that. Plus you're able to have this on your handlebars. You can get real-time data there during your moto and practice and or racing. And then I get to look at your sleep data. Not all platforms allow that. Plus Garmin does not charge you to allow me as a human performance coach to look at it. There's no monthly fee like some of these other subscriptions.
So go ahead. I was saying my other question on that was like more training can equate over time. You're saying it's like using the muscle or hitting the gym. Their volume capability generally goes up. Okay, go ahead.
Finish your first question there because it'll tie into what you just said. Every day that you wear the watch, it's comparing what you do today to yesterday. And it'll compare today and yesterday to what you did last week and last week to what you did last month and last month to what you did last year. So anyone who has the Garmin and it says you're overreaching or you're overtraining, don't let that be a fret, because if you went into the off season and you're spending 30 minutes a day on a pump track, riding a pit bike, going kayaking, doing things that you don't normally do during the season because it's your off season, it's going to say, oh, you're under training, you're detraining. For shit, Sherlock. That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
But then you go into preseason and you go from 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 4 days a week. So you go from 2 hours total over a week and you go to 10 hours. You're doing 2 hours a day, super easy, low intensity. You just went from 4 hours to 10. It's going to say, whoa, pull the parachute, Derek. You're doing way too much, until the tail of the snake catches and goes, oh, this is his new established volume. everything resets.
Right. Okay.
There's a lot more to it. I don't want to overwhelm the list.
No, I got you. But that's where
what we
you
do
come
for
into
a
play.
living.
The watch is just generic, right? My next question was genetically, do you just have athletes that, like they say, the Jeremy Martins, some people just can take volume, or is it, and some can't?
This would be, because you'd asked earlier, what would be the benefits of preseason? Number one, it would be build strength, build an aerobic engine. And this one has a lot of complexities, but I'm going to keep it very simplistic. A lot of athletes out there, regardless of your age, whether you're 8, 28, 48, a lot of people don't understand what work is. And what I mean by that is some people think that if they go to the gym 3 days a week for 30 minutes, that's work. That's why I want to be very careful. There's a lot of complexities to this. If it's Derek Harris and he's working a 70-hour work week, 3 30-minute workouts in the gym is perfect, because that's really all you've got. But when you're asking me, why can't I go and win Loretta's? Well, the work you're putting in doesn't match the output that you're asking of your body. And that's my responsibility, to be honest and forthright with everybody. If I go a totally different sport, there's a gentleman, if I mentioned his name publicly, everybody would know who he is. He's a very top CEO. He hired us to train him for Ironman. And within 2 months of looking at, I'll submit my training schedules to all my clients on Friday for next week. They have the weekend to take a look at it. We can make adjustments to what your life looks like. And then at the end of the week, we do a projected versus actual. This is what I asked you to do. This is what you were able to do. After 2 months, I just said to him, you don't have enough time to train the amount of hours that's necessary to race Ironman and do it healthy. And now he's a hyper competitive person. He didn't want to participate. He wanted to race an Ironman. At an amateur level, that could be 8 to 9 hours. Our top pros, it's around 7.5 to 7:45. 7.5 hours of balls to the wall racing. Now come back to moto. There's a lot of people out there, especially for parents who have young athletes. You don't know, I don't know until we start gathering data, how much work can your athlete actually do? Because I have to know what they're willing to do versus what they think they need to do. That's a very important. We were talking about earlier, your ability to absorb. But then I have a responsibility to everyone listening. All right, if you're on a 65, it's not if we're going to an 85, it's when. If you're on an 85, it's not if we're going to a 125, it's when. So I'm trying to find that finite line between, we get the most out of the bike you're on. And I always say this, when you're on a super mini, I want it to feel nimble like a 65. When you're on a 125, I want it to feel nimble like a super mini. And the idea here is I have to merge being ready for the next class so you can dominate the current. But then, and Derek, I hate to rip a scab off, but most parents, the best example I can give, 65, my little Johnny's little Susie, that's too sophisticated. We don't need that. They get on an 85, bike's getting faster. They get on a super mini, and all of a sudden they're realizing that thing's a rocket ship. Then they jump to the 125, bigger wheels. Everybody's excited about 125. It's bigger. And then they get thrown to the ground and they break. And they go, oh, I guess we need to get strong. You've already missed it by about 2.5 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to the tail of the snake, you're going to a bigger bike. We knew this for a year, but you didn't get ready for it. It's like Clayton showing up for SMX with outdoor suspension, and he needed Supercross.
Man, that needed, and then of course that getting the Supercross suspension right started well before that would have happened, right? So, and that's the challenges of racing, right? But like you said, got to have an eye on the future, 100%, and that's a challenge. Yeah,
I don't want the parents to think, goodness, something else for me to micromanage. Right. Exact opposite. Wear the watch. We talk and we meet, we go through all of this. Now, this is not a sales pitch for us. I want the parents to understand you are the factory rig, from the front of the truck to the back of the truck, from the bottom to the top of the truck.
Yeah.
You're parts deliverer, you're the installer, you're the mechanic, you're suspension specialist, you're motor builder, you're everything, right? Now, you may be on the phone with Derek asking about jetting, but who's the one messing with that?
You got to do it.
You are. I love what you said, moving the bars up, moving them down, changing triple clamps, making them softer, making them stiffer. One click in, one click out. And I know we're about to run out of time here, Derek. When we come back to the bike, where would you recommend, like for myself, it'd be get strong, build an aerobic engine, and understand what work is. And I don't want that to sound sarcastic, but a lot of people think they know what work is. For you, what would be 3 things that you would recommend in this off season that is essentially free money for them?
Well, we've talked about this in the show a little bit, but it's learning how to learn your motorcycle.
Okay.
So that's just testing and writing notes down. You know, how many people really do that? write down notes, keep notes. Number two is, so learning how to be a test rider. Now, we talked about earlier in the show, that might take you 3, 4, 5, 6 years but I'll tell you right now, would you want to be that guy who does make it to pro and then you got to learn 3, 4, 5, 6 years at pro how to be a test rider? All of a sudden you lose a career because a team, they want you to win today. And so that's something that's important. Number two would be one of the biggest mistakes. You talked about it. And I think families are really wising up on this, at least the elite. I mean, you know what? Let me back that up. All the elite families have figured this out. Elite as in results focused. But if you're trying to become elite and you haven't figured this out, you need to. Your bike on race day, needs to be pretty similar to your practice bike. Doesn't have to be the exact same, but your practice bike can't be, like you said, 116 hours and worn out and junk. And then you go get in a brand new race bike. You can't do that. So the value of the three things, right? And is the value of servicing your motorcycle. I don't know. I mean, it's expensive if you got to pay a shop like me to do it. But if you're capable of keeping your bearings fresh and grease, we get bikes in here with 20, 25 hours that the linkage bearings are all locked up because they pressure wash them. They put them away. And then they're wondering why their suspension's no good. It's like, dude, I can't even get your shock off, because this is all locked up or your swing arm stuck or whatever. And then it takes way more effort on our end when bearings are all seized up to get them out. So, servicing your motorcycle on every front, be it bearings, be it tires, be it your suspension, if you put 50 hours on it, it doesn't feel the same as it does at hour 5 or hour 1. So just keeping up with a notepad and a service interval and kind of getting a schedule on things that you do, your owner's manual, it might be more frequent than you want to do it, but it's actually pretty close if you look at those hour intervals of what they're going to recommend. But just those little details make all the difference in the world. I mean, a crazy one, like you talked about earlier, making a pro happy, but just think about how a worn out seat feels versus a new seat. And sometimes a kid likes the worn out seat, depending on the bike. And sometimes a kid likes the new seat. But if you got this huge disparity and, the KTM, I don't know what they cost now, but let's say it's $100 to freshen up your seat. Maybe you should do that or rotate your seats. I know a lot of the teams do that. They take all their new bike seats and then they throw them on the practice bike for a couple hours. Then it goes on the race bike because they don't want to show up on race day with a brand new seat. As stupid as that sounds, that little detail there is a comfort thing. So those are really, really big things. And I had a guy text me, a great friend of mine. So he's 30 something, great rider, and he orders parts and stuff from me. He's been a client forever, but he was like, man, I've been trying to run these Ironman, whatever sprockets there. I can't think of the name of them. They last forever. They're hardened steel, but when the sprocket lasts forever, the chain's always stretching and wearing, and the sprocket wears a little bit. So then he goes to put a new chain on this sprocket and it just destroys the chain and destroys the sprocket. And he's like, I think I'm going to go back to just a standard aluminum, cheaper, but it's going to last less. And I'm like, dude, yes. And I hate to say this, but it's like, those are wear items. So, you can't make something last forever on that side of things. If you're family, don't be pushing chains, the one little item, too far. Imagine a chain snaps, kid gets hurt. It happens. Chains are not, they get punished. If you really watch them, they get punished. So little details like that, I think maintenance is key. And then lastly, I don't know, take an interest in your mods, take an interest in your performance, take an interest in your suspension, take an interest in what's going on so that you learn enough to become dangerous. Our YouTube channel has everything you practically need to know to do suspension, not do it, but to see what's in it. And I think that most parents just don't take enough interest in that stuff. And so you're easy to get sold the world, right? That's number one. And then number two, you don't if you really start to understand those concepts just a little bit, all of a sudden it makes your adjustment so much easier. Okay, hey, now I know what adding 5 cc's of oil does because I understand what it does inside the fork. And now I know, the kid's complaining, this bike's great, but he just bottoms that single over there every lap. Well, maybe we go add 5 or 10 cc's of oil and all his problems are solved. So that's something that I think as a parent, you just have to be involved in. Like you said, the problem is I look at it from the motorcycle side. You look at it from the human performance side. The dad is having to do, or the mom is having to do, or both are having to do the truck, the driving, the kid, the school, the work, so it's not easy to take an interest in all of these things, but unfortunately that's what it kind of sort of takes, or hire a guy, and that's going to be expensive. But if you got the funding, get a team, get people on your side who know what they're talking about. And then I would say lastly, and this is a challenging one because I respect all the mechanics, but you go hire some 18 to 24, I see it all the time. Some 18 to 24-year-old or 18 to 22-year-old mechanic. And then they're going to come in here and you need to do this. And I know this and, set the bike. They really probably don't know actually what they're talking about. And so you need to be very careful on who you take advice from. And I think that's a tough one to overcome, but definitely, like I see it all the time. I get a guy come up to me, I talked to so-and-so's factory mechanic at factory team, and they said they do this. And I'm like, do you really think that applies to you? Like, it's not the same bike. It's not the same anything. So why would you want to do that? Or like, people look at sprocket ratios and they can't grasp that a Honda and a Kawasaki and a KTM, well, the Kawasaki Yamaha runs a 1248 or a 1348. How come my KTM's running a 1452? Or I want to run a 1248 like the Yamaha. Well, they don't have the same transmissions and the same primary gears. So you can't just look at the sprocket numbers on different bikes. And then that's true of the factory level, right? They unfortunately are not running standard internals. Actually, the reason their sprockets usually look around the stock numbers is the factories want you to think they are running a stock. They go inside the bike and change things up. They want you to buy the bike as you see it on the showroom is kind of their vision there. So those are the things, be careful who you get advice from. And maybe always dig a little deeper into what that advice might be. If you know the why, then you can try, but if you don't know the why, don't try it.
And I couldn't agree with you more. If you're not sleeping good, ask why. If you're not performing well, you just made a comment. I never really thought about this in the parallels. I'm sorry, before we go any further, what is your YouTube channel?
HP Race Development. Yeah. So all platforms are the same. Yeah. HP Race Development, Instagram, HP Race Development website, HP Race Development YouTube.
And I'll put that link in the description box. You made a comment, and I think this is pretty interesting parallel. You mentioned, hey, go try 5 cc's of oil, and that's could rectify the problem of it bottoming out over there. Boy, what's the cost of 5 cc's of oil?
Yeah, not much. Yeah.
Right. Versus thinking that you've got to go buy an A kit.
Yeah.
And it's like when someone says to me, man, I need to get in better shape. And then I find out that they have a 7% sweat rate in a 20-minute moto at Loretta's, and they do that for the first 3 motos, which means they're now chronically dehydrated. By the time they get to Friday, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, a hydrated cell is nice and big. If you can see my fingers, I'm doing an AOK symbol. A dehydrated cell is about half, if not 3/4 that. Well, you carry oxygen on the surface of the cell. So if you have an excessive sweat rate and you don't replenish that, by the time you get done with practice on Monday, you're already dehydrated going into Tuesday. You race a moto on Tuesday, you're even more dehydrated on Wednesday. You have 2 motos on Wednesday, and people race below their capabilities, call me up and say, I've got to get in better shape. And we find out you just need to get hydrated. Hey, you don't need an A kit. You just might need 5 millimeter, you just need a little bit more fork oil to keep it from bottoming out versus a $12,000 set of A kits.
I mean, I was at that ride event, and I'll give them, they make the industry go round and round. And I want them, it's like having a sweet ride and you have the tons of money, you have a Ferrari or this or that, and you go accessorize it and you put shit on it that probably makes it worse. Who cares? Right? You got the money. It's cool. So if you're that type of guy, you're like, look, I have the money. I can buy a kit and I geek out on this stuff. I'm not telling you not to buy that stuff.
Exactly.
Like, it's great. But like you said, if you don't have that, or if you're more results and logic based, sometimes it just takes a little bit of stuff, like the number one thing you said there, it's funny, is somebody buys a kit like, dude, I can jump everything. I don't bottom. It's unbelievable. But then they go to the race and it's too stiff and it doesn't absorb the bumps. It's like, yeah, it did all those things because you rode it on like a wide open track where you tried to flatland everything. But then you went to the real racetrack and it really wasn't set up for you. By the time they go down that road of getting it set up right, they can no longer go jump everything, flatland. It's no longer FMX suspension. Well, it wasn't intended to be, right? So you have to understand that it's not always what is it called? It's most of the time it's the Indian. It's not the Aero, unfortunately. And occasionally the Aero sucks. It went left, it went right, it wasn't right. But sometimes you just had a little tweak in the Aero and all of a sudden it was good. You didn't need to go throw it out and, replace it with a new one and all that stuff. But again, I like the people who geek out and buy parts and products and pieces. That's sweet. I mean, I got client, building a motorcycle nowadays on the Instagram and the media has become art as much as it has become function. So that's cool. I have nothing wrong with that. I think it's an art myself. So that's super awesome.
But for the sake of our listeners, and we can wrap up on this thread of thought, if you recognize through documentation and consultation with someone like Derek, understanding that maybe you have outgrown your current suspension settings, and maybe that is the final step, that's a different story.
Yep.
It's the idea that you've pushed your existing equipment to its limit and you validated it over and over and over and over again, then it's time to maybe upgrade. I've mentioned this before on the show, but I'll reiterate it. I had somebody that offered me a tremendous amount of money to buy Adam C's mini
Right.
And I worked with him all when he was on super minis, right? And people are like, I'll pay you X amount of dollars and I want to purchase AC's performance program. And I just said it would literally destroy your son, because your son doesn't have the foundation that AC built with me over 3 to 4 years. You're only seeing the end product and you're only looking at the output, not the input. That's why I was saying earlier, you need to understand what you're capable of. What does work actually look like, projected versus actual? There's a difference between saying you do 10 hours of work a week and actually doing 10 hours a week and recovering from it. And it's like that with suspension.
Yeah, we talked about this concept, right? So here's the realm of riding possibilities, and here's where your suspension is at. And let's just say that was, speed. So let's just say you're set up on the slow side. You're not a Loretta's guy. You're not a regional guy. You can't even, qualify out of an area yet. Well, your suspension needs to be in this range, and that's where you need to be. But as you start getting to, okay, hey, we got 6th place at the area, you probably needed to shift your range of suspension here. And now, hey, now we're challenging, top 6 at regionals, and our suspension shifts to here. And that's like stiffness, right? We're essentially talking stiffness. And then, okay, now we're like, a B class top 10. Well, all right, it moved to here. Now we're A class. It moved a little bit here. Now we're we're outdoor national pro. It moved to here. And then all of a sudden we go to supercross. And not only is it like a little shift, but but your suspension only has this range. I don't care what you do to it. It has this range in which it works. So if your rider's evolving, if his weight's evolving, if the bike's evolving, then you need to adjust that range. And the same applies on every category, right? From the fitness side, you start down here at the bottom, you start climbing your way up that mountain.
Well, mine's a lot easier because I can say, we're at phase number 17. Go back and do your phase 1 workouts, which you thought was difficult. Now seems like butter. And it's like, for the listener, 2 + 2, most everybody can answer that question. But there was a time when you struggled with flashcards on 2 + 2.
Right.
So it's all relevant. And I always like to say to my athletes, we've got limited time with unlimited resources and options. And it's knowing what to focus on that becomes so important. And that's literally the genesis of this whole show. So,
right. 100%. Well, thanks for the time. I got a jet today.
Yep. No, this is great. This is episode number 19. Again, thanks to Energy Fuel for making this show happen. Derek, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for all those who are subscribing, following us. We deeply appreciate it. Leave any comments in the comments below here on YouTube, and we'll make sure we get back to you. And we will catch up with you next month. Be safe.